It's great to be here to talk to you today about positive parenting and promoting learning in the home. I have a relatively short time, so I just want to share with you a couple of ideas around this whole very important topic, and maybe interact with you a little bit and hear some response to them. I should introduce. I've already been introduced, but I suppose I describe myself primarily as a mental health professional. I've been working with families for over 25 years now, and my focus of my work has been to try to help, primarily with parents, trying to help parents manage difficulties for their children. I would see all types of difficulties in a mental health context. Children who've struggling with their learning, children with behavioural problems, children with emotional problems, families under stress, and so forth. And I work with children of all ages, from as young as 2 or 1 or 2 up to about 18, if you can still call them children at that point. And my focus has always been practically trying to solve problems for families and practically trying to help parents, empower parents to do that. My focus, as I say, is primarily with parents as opposed to with the children, because actually parents, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes, parents are more powerful than their children, just about, in terms of changing things and making things different at home. One of the most common difficulties that people do talk to me about with the primary school age child, are one of the most common situations I see is where there's a struggle around the child's learning at home. Usually this is a particular difficulty around the child's not doing homework. They might have a range of educational difficulties, and this causes enormous stress on the family. And so my knowledge I'm sharing with you is based on that type of experience. If I just go through, hopefully this will work. It didn't. I put this as my disclaimer to make sure that anything I share with you is really, I'm always saying there's no one right way to bring up children. What matters is finding your own way as parents. So that anything I say you try to test with your own experience. Because often parents feel quite disempowered by experts telling them what to do. My focus is always helping parents find their own solutions to the challenges they're facing in this way. The ideas come from the Parents Plus programs, just to mention them. If you're interested in finding more, these are 8-week parenting courses we deliver in clinics and in schools to parents, and so if you're interested to find more about the ideas in this way. So there's no doubt that it's important for parents to support their children's learning. Nobody can dispute that. I'm sure I haven't been here for most of the talks today, but I'm sure that's not in dispute. All the evidence, all the studies show that when parents are actively involved in their children's learning and collaborate with the schools, children do much, much, much better. Parents feel much better, and children do much better, and schools do much better. So there's almost no dispute about that at all in any way. And there's also a recognition that parents are the primary people who provide education for their children, and they're the primary people from which their children learn from. Now, of course, that's easier. That's easier said than done, because most parents I meet are struggling with trying to teach their children. Now, they often come to me. They're struggling with the homework, is where this really comes up as a big issue. They might be struggling with formal education. And they often get into a pattern whereby the children, I would see there's a sort of battle going on around homework. These are very well intended parents. They're trying to get their children to learn. Their children aren't learning or are struggling. The child is not doing well. And homework becomes a battle that gets longer and longer and causes lots of difficulties and stresses out the parent and stresses out the child and so forth. And this is often so problematic. I'd say that in the parents, the children I would see, about 1/3 of them, this is a common dynamic in the clinic. Now, most of these children come with their own difficulties and so forth. So what I'm trying to do often is help those parents find a better way of helping their children learn, and a better way of understanding how to help their children find their place in the world. It's interesting that people often put a big emphasis on homework and the importance of it in the home, but actually when you look at the studies, there's very little evidence that doing homework actually increases a child's attainment in school. Isn't that interesting, isn't it? This is probably a bit heresy, isn't there? Particularly at the primary school level. And particularly when the child has difficulty, if the homework experience becomes negative. And actually, often homework is used to serve other functions. It's often a way of school demonstrating what the child is doing. But quite often when it's a problem, when a child is struggling, if it's a negative experience, it's actually counterproductive rather than productive to force your child to learn in a homework situation if they're not enjoying it. Isn't that interesting, isn't it? Many of you do that. Sort of make sure he's going to do it. If he struggle, it's a battle. And if he doesn't, I'll keep him there for another hour until he does it. Do you do that? Okay. Completely counterproductive and actually can reduce the child's learning. So I get quite often this point where parents are battling this way to try to eke out another grade or another advancement in their child's education. But all that happens is they erode their relationship with their child and reduce the child's self-esteem and their own self-esteem as a parent. Okay. So you'd be better off in that instance not doing any homework and having a more fun, enjoyable experience with your child. That'd be more beneficial to their learning, is that? Are you shocked by that, are you? Okay. That's usually heretical. Now, I'm not saying abandon homework, but I'm saying if it's not working, if it's a stressful experience primarily, it's unhelpful. Okay. That's the point I'm making. Are you with me on this? Okay. So how do you pull back from that, and what do you do? Okay, so I'm going to share with you some principles around that, if that's the experience that you're in. And the primary ideas that we share in the Parents Plus programs are around parenting being a balanced task, that you're balanced between a number of principles. And the primary balance we talk about is being a positive parent, balanced with being a disciplined parent. And a positive parent is one who's close to their children, who understands their point of view, who appreciates their feelings, who is involved in their lives, who's fun with them, and so forth. And a disciplined parent is a parent who sets rules, who's firm, who structures, who sees their goal as teaching children how to behave. Which style do you think is the most important? Positive, loving one I hear today? Okay. Both is the truth. Both about equally. Now, traditionally, I had a very interesting talk there a couple of days ago about how we've changed as parents in Ireland, or indeed the Western world. Traditional parenting very much emphasised discipline first. If you were in the 50s or 60s, it was all about the goal of parenting was good character, teaching children rules. Modern parenting shifted a little bit for good reason, because a lot of that disciplined parenting had its own problems. Children grew up with a distance from their parents. Often their emotional needs weren't met. In extreme terms, sometimes there's very extreme discipline towards them, which was very harmful, and so forth. So people abandoned that and moved modern parenting, more positive parenting, emphasising children's feelings and emotions and encouraging all that. And that's where we've drifted a little bit. But of course, there's a danger about positive parenting becoming overindulgent, and lots of the problems of children not behaving well, or lack of structure, or lack of learning, is often an overemphasis of positive parenting. The classic thing where that happens is the parent becomes indulgent, and they think that if I just reason with my child and care for them, they'll behave. Do you have that experience? So you think, like, when you have a 3-year-old, if I just reason with her, she'll put on the right socks. Does that work? And of course, what happens with the overemphasis of parenting is that's when it becomes problematic. And usually the parents doing the homework start out with this. They're reasonable, they're encouraging, they're supportive, and then they become frustrated and angry, and they snap and get really angry and say, do the bloody homework, okay? And then they do, because they don't know how to invoke discipline. Is that? But it's, and then they switch very quickly from positive parenting to sort of aggressive parenting, or the child becomes aggressive to them. So that's the problem. You need a good balance between the two approaches, and that's what we're looking at. Traditional parenting is good on discipline, modern parenting is good on positive, warm stuff, but you need both. Loads and loads and loads of evidence to show that's correct in studies with children. in helping children. We could talk for hours about that. Okay, so in homework and learning, you need a balance of these two principles, okay? You need a balance of positive parenting and learning, that's like fun learning, following the child's lead. Children learn most in play. Did you know that? Children learn most in the things that most interest them, in their passions and interests. They will learn most when you actually trust their instincts and their intelligence and what they need to do. Absolutely most. They learn in projects they want to do. They learn least in things that are forced on them, stressful learning that make them feel bad about their abilities, and so forth. But equally, that means it's not a case of just giving up all that, because there is a very big role for formal teaching with children and supporting them. That's why we have schools, and for some of that to occur in the home, for that to extend into the home. But we're around homework routines and rules and consequences and rewards for children around doing homework and so forth, and learning in the home. There's, of course, room for that, but that's largely meant to be done in schools. You're only a partial extension to that. The good news for you is that you should largely do the positive parenting stuff and let the school do the work and the other stuff in this way. So, for example, I'd often have parents who actually will do the homework for their child rather than let the child go in without the homework. So the school will often have the idea that the child is sort of doing the homework, but it's actually mum who's doing the homework. Now, it might be not just that, but they've got caught into a pattern around doing those sorts of things. It mightn't be to that degree, but they'd be better off focusing on a positive style and letting the child experience go back into school without the homework done, and having some discussion around why that is. Is that okay? In many circumstances, okay. So I want to just expand a little bit on those two poles and how you put them into action in the home, and your goal to do that and focusing on learning. So. The first principle which is prosperity is that is about understanding your child's unique motivations, strengths, and talents. This is how you know best to help a child learn and learn at their maximum and find their niche and build their self-esteem. It's about knowing who your child is, where are their strengths, what really is their passion, and what are their talents. How can you build upon that? And this is a very unique map of your child. You discover every child is different. Each child has their own passions, and each has their own talents. Now, sadly, what happens is this is a holistic view of intelligence. There's ranges of different abilities that children have. What sadly happens in school tends to only focus on one, okay, over time as the exams. Now, good schools don't when they start out, and good primary schools don't. But as the pressure of exams come in, only one type of learning is emphasised, or intelligence. Which one is it on the list up there? Reading and writing, written language. Written language is what matters. Now, huge numbers of children have difficulties with written language. Huge numbers of parents who have difficulty with written language are not excel in it. And they often feel left out, and the other forms of learning aren't, our talents aren't given expression. Just to offer a critique of the education system, which is very important to hold. You know, the Leaving Cert, a lot of emphasis put on that, you know, to pass exams and Leaving Cert. The Leaving Cert is designed to separate children out, those exams, to separate some people who pass it and do well and get all the privileged jobs in society, and the ones who don't at the bottom. That's how it's designed. It's a bell curve. It's always an average. So for every child who does really well in the Leaving Cert, there's one who doesn't. So it's not very helpful to helping every child find their place in society, find where they can contribute and what they're good at, and make the most of the world. So it's a pretty limited view in the world. And as parents, your job is not to help children just pass in one narrow definition. You want them to find their niche, what they excel at, how they can contribute, and how they can live productive lives. Would that be right? Are you all with me on that? So sometimes it doesn't work out that the school thing. Now, I'm very biased about this, because almost all the children I see in the mental health settings are struggling in school, 2/3. And they're made feel bad about that. because of the education, and their parents are made feel bad about it too. Is that okay? So what I'm interested in thinking that you do need to see a holistic view of your child's ability and where their talents lie. Now, there could be academic talents, which is fantastic. They could, and you want them to excel at their academic talents. Of course you do. So, but there's a range of other ones that are there. So you've got verbal language, children who are very good at talking and communication. Written language, like reading, writing, maths and logic. So children are very good at numbers, logic, and things like that. Some children are naturally athletic or physical, or can learn those things. Some children have talents around music or rhythm, or those types of more right brain stuff. Some people are good at design or motor skills. Some have excellent social interpersonal skills. Some are more experiential learners, outdoor, naturally oriented children. So you need to know your map of your child and where their talents and motivations lie. Are you with me on this? And you want to start always with their talents, and support those. So now there are some brilliant and let them excel in those learning areas. Now there are some ways of learning that you allow your child. You can help children learn according to their strengths, and there are brilliant ways of doing that. For example, and schools often do brilliant things like that. So, but if you're teaching. Let's say you're teaching something about gardening for the sake of argument, or something about nature. You could do it by verbal language to describe it to the child. You could also let them read about it or write about it. But you could also let them physically go out and start practicing learning, which might be their way of doing things. They might be more experiential oriented learners. Or you could do it in a social dimension, that there's a team and they're working with other children who are learning together, so you build on their social strengths if that's where they are. Or there could be a way that they get some sense of design and designing a project for themselves about learning, whether it's sewing something and so forth. That would extend their own talents in this way. So there's always a way of teaching something according to your child's strengths and passions. Is that? Okay. So you're really looking for that. It's part of this unique map of your child's abilities and strengths is quite important, I think. That's not to say that you shouldn't give up on your child in their areas of weakness and demotivation. So there could be areas that they're not as strong on, and you want to help them develop those skills. So if your child has difficulties with language, or you have to help them with that, of course, and you spend time supporting that. But you recognise that that's something you're only going to bring up to a certain strength. And what you want to help is children to have a balanced approach to learning. A metaphor I often use is rugby. I'm a little bit of a rugby fan, and I was talking to George Hook on his show about this, and he was saying that in some ways rugby original idea was that you could have lots of different people contributing in different ways on the team. Now, of course, it's probably not the same way now. So you have the winger who's very fast, and then you have the prop who's not very fast at all, but holds up the scrums. So you want, in a way, but it's a team. You want the team to win. So in a way, you want children to find what they're good at, and then know where their area of weakness are, and then improve that as much as possible. Like in this scrum, if anyone knows rugby, the Irish team, Mike Ross, he holds up the scrum, but he's not very good at passing the ball, but he learns it up to as much as he can. Is that? So you want to help your child you support as much as their area of weakness to bring it up to as much as they can, but you want to show them their area of strength and where they excel at. If you just focus on their area of weakness, keep bashing away at that and improving that, it's terribly demotivating, demoralizing. Are you with me on that? Strengths dominate, weaknesses support it. Okay. So this is what you're after, and using a child's passions to drive this learning. And you can always use the child. Like for example, I'll tell you two stories about the children I worked with a child who. Would have had very sort of obsessional interests, sort of a little bit on the autistic spectrum, and he was obsessed with, this is when he was a little child, he was obsessed with Thomas the Tank. Is that still an obsession for small children? Very good, very good. And his parents were very worried about this. They wanted him to learn other stuff and do his homework, which is fair enough. Get into a lot of conflict with him about that. And instead, when we worked with them, they tried to use Thomas the Tank as the vehicle for learning. Okay. So they got themselves involved in his world, an obsession with Thomas the Tank, So I think the dad said he was only doing that for the sake of his child. I think he got an appreciation of how Thomas and the wonders of him. And they used that as a vehicle for learning, to show him. They joined him in his world. They showed him how they have to be they could teach about colours, developing number, start joining in adventures, push him out a little bit on Thomas to think about where he was going, learning geography, bringing all things, using his special interest to get written things about Thomas to thank, so that he'd be interested in other things, and so forth. So they joined and extended out. Are you with me on this? So this is a very creative way to do that. Equally, you can complain about your child's obsession with computer games, or you could also think, well, how can I'm not saying you should let them play them all the time, but how can I use that as a potential? How could I join in that and use that as a vehicle for learning, if that is where their passion is? Is that okay? So it's about trying to tune into that makes a big difference. Okay, so let me just take a point of reflection, because I think the positive parent, you're tuned into your children and you want to know what their areas of talent and motivations and strength are, but you want to be build on those, really extend and emphasize and let them excel at their talents and strength, and also be sensitive to their areas of weakness and difficulties. You don't have to, and don't bang on about that at them. So, that's quite demoralizing. Like, for example, I work with parents who might have an anxious child. That's a very common thing, or a child who's very shy interpersonally. Who's not a big successful, not the life and soul of the party type, finds those situations are quite difficult. And often the parent is quite extrovert, or sometimes the parent is quite shy themselves. It depends, and they're quite worried about that. And what they might do is, when they see their child going into a social situation and being shy, what do normally a parent might say to them, or other people might say to them? You're shy. And anyone who's shy, does that help? Is that helpful? You're shy. Self-anxious, what does it usually make them? More shy, exactly, correct. Don't do that ever again. So you, in a way, you want a different time to look at what are their talent and interests. That'd be the way to access their ability to learn socially. I worked with a girl who was cripplingly shy, or selectively mute, almost. But what we found was, and she'd be going to school, she couldn't really talk, but we found by helping her find her interest and social areas of strength, she could make a difference. She found something she was really good at. This is in terms of she was a big passion for working with animals, and she joined the club around that, met other girls and so forth, and her life took off. So it's your area of strength that made the difference. So it's very important that you have a map about your children's areas of strength, and you support their areas of weakness, but and they learn most in the areas of strength. Okay. So I've only a couple of minutes left, so I'll just mention briefly a couple of the other points that I could look at. On the discipline side of helping learning, the key is with disciplined parenting is routine. That's where discipline is made easiest. It's the ability to have clear routines. They say there's only three. You know the way they say there's only three things you need to know about when buying a house. What do they say the three things are? Yeah, everyone knows that. It's very interesting, isn't it? It's like curious, isn't it? And there's only three things you need to know with parenting is routine, routine. If I think of one big structure that we do when you build the discipline, you want to build a bit of discipline around learning, is to have a routine around learning in the home and homework. Is that okay? And the classic routine has to include in that fun times as well. So the classic routine I work with parents to put in place in the home would be: child comes in, they have a connecting time, which is part of the routine. This is a positive parenting, connecting chat, cup of tea, snack. Or it could be the walk home, they do that. Often parents drop that bit, this sort of relationship building time or the play time. Then they should have the homework time, the formal learning time, and then they might have another fun learning time after that. So, and you have this little sandwich, connect, formal learn, which would be doing the homework, and then a fun learning time after that, and then the child maybe their own time. And that's what in a summary of many myriad of routines that I put in place in family, that's the core summary of how that works best. Now, if you're lucky, sometimes you get, and I do meet these children as well, that they say their fun time is doing homework. That's lucky, isn't it? But not many of the children I see say that. Some do actually, but not all of them. I had this I did a survey with primary school age children. These were children mainly who had attention problems and were struggling a little bit in school, all about 10. And I asked them what did they love to do with their mum or dad. And then I asked the parents what they thought the child loved to do with them. And what was very interesting, they gave very different answers, the parents and children. What do you think the parents said? These are in a survey then. What do you think your 10-year-old loves to do with you? What do you think? This is a great way of accessing your child's connection with you and also their strengths. What's it? Television? No. This is what the parents said. What did the parents say? Play board games. They did, absolutely. They said things like board games, jigsaws, things with slightly learning, teachy oriented stuff. The parents said, this is what she likes doing with me. Board games, jigsaws, homework, and so forth. They tended to say stuff like that. I asked the children, what did they say? What? Ice cream? No, they didn't say ice cream. I said, what did you love doing with your mum or dad? What? Rough play. Something in the line of rough play, which was like physical play, cuddling, wrestling, running, walking. Do you know what I mean? Now, I was talking with this dad with this 10-year-old girl, and he was going on in the learning play, and she said, what I love wrestling my dad. And he was a bit mortified by that, but apparently the thing she loved most was having a good wrestle with him, and she particularly liked it when Mum joined in as well. So in this way. So that's a fun routine, and you could use that as ability to learn. That's a child who likes physical learning and contact. You need to think, how could we help that be their forte and so forth. That's it. And the routine, she could have a bit of that after she's done a bit of homework, so forth. Okay. So I think I finished there. I have a number of principles that we could look at in terms of how you actually physically do homework with your children, but I had less time than I anticipated, so maybe we could cover that another time. Which are different steps about how you actually physically do homework with children in a way to maximise learning. But we could look at that in another time. Okay. Well, I'll just I'll pause, I think, because if you want more information, there's I've articles on my website, solutiontalk.ie, about 200 articles. There's information on the Parents Plus programs. I have a book, Positive Parenting, which does have some information on supporting children's learning and so forth. But if I can just finish with if I go back to that picture of holistic learning, the key thing is to see a balanced view to your child's abilities and what you want to help them do and learn. I think a good way to look at that is, I think a great example of that is the Gashka Awards, the present in Ireland, because that looks at a child to achieve one of those awards. What do they have to do? They have to do different 4 domains, isn't it? They have to do something, they have to do a social contribution. This is a really important area to help children learn in. Some children have naturally caring and will socially contribute, and they could learn a lot on that. So social contribution. Then they have to do something where they set themselves a personal challenge, and that has personal learning. And they have to do some teamwork and a physical learning or sport as well, or some sort. So you wanted this is what you should be thinking with your children, find their niche in a broad range of different areas in this way. So let me just go back to that, or just a comment on the encouraging child in their homework steps. It's about getting into detail about how you get a child started in the homework, how you support and encourage them, and how you review how your child has got on. The challenge often I find with people who are struggling with homework with their children is they tend to do it for their child. Is that okay? Whereas you want to help them, I want to help parents back off and even let a child do the smallest amount by themselves, is the essence of good learning, is it? So your job is to activate your child and pull back and let them do the bit themselves. And this is really about moving into a more encouraging stance to the child. For example, you might say you set your child to do some homework and they're sitting at the desk like this, you go in to look at them and they're sort of spaced out like this. So what would you normally say? What? You would say, you were the finger, get on to do the homework, couldn't you? So that's where you're taking responsibility for the learning at that point, okay? Which is disempowered your child, is that? Okay? So what could you say instead that would emphasize the child's self-directed learning? It's based out of the book. What's that? You could ask them, have you got on so far? That's great. So you've emphasized on progress. Or you could pick up what they've done well. What have they done well so far? The model again, spaced out. What would you say? What's that? You're doing great. A bit more specific. You look like you're thinking. That's what I go for. Look like you're having a good think about what to do next. Okay? And what are you thinking, I'd say to them, about doing next? And that, giving them back a little bit, you're praising them and looking, seeing what they're doing, the little bit start that they've done so far, is that? Or you could be thinking, you've got the books out, that's a start. Okay? What's the next bit? And then you interrogate what's the next bit, and then you back off, is that? And let them do the next bit by themselves, is that? That's the key to empowerment. Then you come back and say, how did you get on with the next bit, is that? So that's the essence of when we work in the groups with parents, we look at that step-by-step empowering your child in learning. Your role is very important, and this is only in the formal part of learning, which is a small part of a total context, okay? So thank you very much. Thank you.